Okay, guys, I want to start talking about EQ. EQ is a crucial part of audio engineering, whether we're talking about live, in studio, whether we're talking about tracking, mixing, right, even mastering, right? EQ is going to show up everywhere inside of your studio space and inside of just your audio engineering life. And so I want to start unpacking it. We're going to do several videos on EQ, and we're going to start by just breaking down some EQ basics.
At McRae Music.
How are you doing? I am richly blessed. Pray that you are as well. All right, let's jump right into this. EQ, all right, what is EQ? EQ stands for equalization, all right? And so, we have audio sources, all right? So you could have a vocal, you could have an instrument, you could have, whatever source you want. That source is going to operate at different ranges of frequencies in the frequency spectrum, all right? So like a vocal, right? And if we pulled up like a frequency analyzer, and we'll actually see this in a few moments. If I have a vocal, we're going to see the vocal peaking and dipping at certain frequencies. If I had a bass guitar, it is going to live in certain frequency ranges. If I had a drum, or if I had a male singer versus a female singer, right? The frequencies are happening there. If I have someone who speaks in more of a nasally tone, right, or something like that, you're going to have different frequencies that are peaking, right, because of that. And so equalization puts control in our hands and allows us to be able to boost or attenuate frequencies to carve out a sound that we want, or to clean up or tighten up the sound of a particular source, right? And this is going to become extremely crucial when it comes to mixing, because if we've got multiple sources now, if you've got one source, you can almost kind of do what you want, right? But if we have multiple sources that are operating within the same frequency ranges and different frequency ranges, we need to use EQ to make all those things play nice with each other, right? If we've got a vocal and a guitar and a piano that all live in kind of a similar frequency range, well, how are we going to make it so that all three of those things are clearly heard? We're going to use EQ to do that, all right? And there are three types of EQ that we're going to talk about kind of in this EQ series. We have parametric EQ. Parametric EQ is a EQ that is going to allow us to basically establish EQ curves at whatever ranges we want. Or maybe not whatever range you want. Some of them are that free, but you're going to be able to dial in a specific frequency range. You're going to be able to dial in a curve. You're going to be able to have some control over the slope of that curve, and of course, how much you are boosting or attenuating that curve in your EQ. So we have more control there. You also have graphic EQs, and graphic EQs are going to have very specific frequencies. We don't get to choose the frequencies. They're just going to be preset, and we can simply choose to boost or attenuate those frequencies. This is more so used in live settings, but you might possibly find this in the studio setting, but it's more so used in live settings when we need to kind of tune a room and just completely kill certain frequencies so that we're not getting feedback, right? That's a graphic EQ. And then you also have something called dynamic EQ, which is kind of similar to a multiband compressor. There's lots of similarities, but the way they function, there's some subtle differences where we are able to do some EQ, but not have it, kind of have more control over when the EQ is being applied. And, there's some other cool things that we can do with that, right? And we're going to take a look at all of those throughout this series, but in this video, I want to really focus in on the basics of a parametric EQ, which is what you are typically going to be using in a studio environment. I'm going to show you an example of, or a couple of examples of parametric EQs, and we're going to talk about the different components that we would be able to interact with inside of any parametric EQ. Before we take a look at that, please take a moment and like this video. Please take a moment and subscribe to this channel and share this with someone else that you might think wants to see it or needs to see it, or even if they don't need to see it, share it with them anyway, because you never know, they might decide they need to. And let's jump in here and start taking a look at EQ. All right, so there are a couple of things I want to do here. The first thing that I want to do is show you what a graphic EQ looks like versus a parametric EQ, and it's just in general. So if you ever come across one, you know what you're looking at. And then I want to show you the two different ways that a parametric EQ could appear in your DAW. And then we will break down the different components that we would find in a parametric EQ and just kind of see what each thing does. We're not going to really play with any frequencies here in this video. I just want us to get an understanding of the different controls we would find. So here is a graphic EQ. And as you can see, and it's rare that you're going to run into this in a studio setting. You are much more commonly these days going to see this. If you see these at all, it will be most likely in a live setting where you're trying to ring out a room and there's like specific frequencies that we might want to kill in a room, right? You notice that the 12K frequency is, giving feedback, giving issues in a room, and we just want to kill that, right? We can do that, right? So there are established frequency ranges in here. And we can't change them. This particular one lets me go from a 31 band to a 10 band, but there's only 10 frequencies as opposed to 31. Obviously, the 31 gives us a little bit more control, but we cannot choose the frequencies and we can't change anything about them except we can boost them or we can attenuate them. All right, that's it. All right, so that's a graphic EQ. That's all we'll say about that because that's not what this video is really about. Now, there are two different ways that parametric EQs can show up. Let's get this graphic EQ out of here. Inside of your DAW, all right? The most common way that we would see a parametric EQ these days would be something like this. And I'll load up one that actually has some work being done on it. This is most commonly what a parametric EQ is going to look like in our DAW, right? It is going to be more visual. We are going to be able to kind of freely, and I'm not going to move anything around here because this is an actual mix that's set, so I don't want to play with it because it's where I want it to be. But we can actually move things around visually and see what's going on, all right? So we have, of course, we should always be mixing with our ears, but this typical kind of EQ gives us a spectral analyzer. Typically, we'll see that in a little bit, where we can actually see what's going on with the frequencies. We can freely drag stuff around, right? And it's a really free-flowing, almost like a whiteboard style of EQ, right? So this is most commonly what you are going to see, all right? But the other way that we can see a parametric EQ represented in a DAW is going to be something like this. All right, so this is a Slate virtual mix rack because, of course, in the Ed McCrae music video, you're going to see a Slate product and probably the virtual mix rack at some point because that's just what happens. But right here we have a parametric EQ, and these types are typically going to be ones that are modeling analog hardware, right? You're not going to really find analog gear that is going to look like this, all right? You're not going to find analog gear that looks like that. So these are going to have knobs and they're going to look this way, okay? Now, and this particular one is modeling an SSL EQ, all right? Now, if you are brand spanking new to EQ and you are really trying, or you're trying to kind of brush up on your frequency ranges and kind of sharpen your hearing when it comes to EQing things, I strongly recommend playing around with an EQ like this. This is going to be great for you to learn because you can't see anything. So all you can do is hear. So if I start moving stuff around, I don't have my eyes to play tricks on me and I can hear, oh, this is what 2K sounds. Oh, this is what 6K. This is what, 300 hertz sounds like, right? And, we can boost and attenuate or find a specific frequency. We can boost and attenuate and what have you. The limitation that you have for this type of EQ is you are going to be limited in the number of bands that you can have. So this particular one has 4, but this is great for really fine-tuned EQ, especially as you're first learning and you want to figure out what each frequency range is doing. I like this one because it breaks it down as it would on an SSL: high frequencies, high mids, low frequencies, and then a high pass filter at the bottom. If you don't know what those terms mean, don't worry. We're going to learn all about these different frequency bands and ranges in another video. But this is really cool. All right. So you'll see things that look like that sometimes. All right. I am going to get that out of here. I want to talk about the different components of an EQ using the Pro Q4 here, simply because it's more visual and you will easily be able to kind of see and understand what is going on. All right. So the first thing that, if you're using an EQ like this, if I were to just hit play, we are going to see a spectral analyzer showing me the frequencies and the movements of the frequencies in whatever it is that I am playing. In this case, it's going to be a vocal. Let's take a look. My will is killing me. I need to lay it down. All right, so that is really cool, right? Because we can see what's going on. Now, again, we always want to mix with our ears and not our eyes, but being able to see things, especially after you have an understanding of the different frequency ranges, you use your eyes to confirm what you think you're hearing with your ears, right? So this is cool, right? We can see what's going on. We can see where energy is really built up. We can, basically know what's going on, right? Okay. So in order to talk about the different types or components of a parametric EQ, we need to do we need to put a curve in here. And we can see that on this type of EQ, I can go all throughout and I can put a curve wherever it is I want on here. And that's one of the benefits of this type of parametric EQ, right? You are free to do things wherever you want, all right? So I'm just going to put a curve right here. Let's just put a slight dip right here for now, all right? Not because that's what I want, but it gives me these controls where I can begin to talk about the different types of controls that are here. All right, so the first thing you're going to see in a parametric EQ is the type of curve that you want to have, all right? And if I click on this, we're going to see different things here. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here. I want to just talk about the 4 really common ones that we would see. So this is called a bell curve. And if I start boosting or attenuating or boosting, you can see why it's called a bell curve. It literally looks like a bell. All right. And so, we can do that. This is great when we want to focus on a specific frequency range and we want to begin to boost or attenuate the frequencies within that range, right? So right now I'm right here. The center of it is around the 400 range. And then we can see that we are gradually attenuating frequencies between, in this case, 100 and 1K. So this is a fairly large range that we're dealing with here. And we'll talk about how we can change that in a little bit, all right? But this is a bell curve, all right? And that's the default type. It's the most common that you would see. Now, we can also do something called a shelf. A shelf is going to boost or attenuate all the frequencies in that range equally, right? Until we get here to the slope, right? So this is great when I want to, and this is most commonly used when I want to boost or attenuate a large number of lower frequencies or a large number of higher frequencies, right? So here, let's say I notice that I'm having low frequency issues and I want to just bring everything down from the 200 hertz range and down. I could use a low shelf. Boom. Now it's going to attenuate everything there, or I want to bring everything up equally, right? I can do this. A little slope, and again, we'll learn how to change that. But once it gets past the slope, it's doing everything equally, right? So we can do that there, right? And so that is a low shelf. We can tell it's a low shelf because it's always it's like a pitchfork, and the fork part of the pitch is facing to the left, right? So that's a low shelf, right? Now I also have, since we're talking about shelves, I can also do a high shelf. High shelf is going to do the same thing, but for high frequencies, right? So now I can boost or attenuate high frequencies equally starting from a certain point, right? So we kind of saw that represented over here. I've got a fairly aggressive high shelf going on over here because I needed to really bring out some highs in this particular channel that I was working on, right? So I'm bringing them all up here. So that is an example of a high shelf. Okay, so again, shelves, what are shelves doing? Shelves are boosting or attenuating all the frequencies equally, starting from a certain point, right? For either our lows, low shelf, or highs, high shelf. All right. All right. Then we have a low cut, which is also called a high pass, right? So high pass or low cut. And the way you can think about that is either we are cutting the lows, right? So that if you say low cut, we're cutting the lows at a certain point, or high pass is the same thing, but it means we are allowing the highs to pass, all right? So we're cutting the lows and letting the highs go, all right? And so this is something that we can do. So we can, again, start at a certain point, and let's say, I'm dealing with a vocal. I'm most likely going to have a high pass. Matter of fact, I'm definitely going to have a high pass on the vocal, right? If I pull up this EQ curve I got going on over here, I've got a high pass on the vocal, right? Because vocals don't operate down here, so there's no need for that stuff to be in there. We'll talk about that another time. But this is great, right? So I can choose to cut all of my frequencies below a certain point. And again, we'll talk about how we can change the slope of that. Of course, I can also do a high cut or a low pass, right? So in this case, we are cutting the highs and allowing the lows to pass, right? So again, different names for different things. So just like in music, right? You can call it an A flat or you can call it a G sharp, right? So it's the same thing. You'll just hear both of those terms used, right? But if I look here, I can again choose, and this is typically used when we want to do some filtering. I actually think I do have that happening in here somewhere in the mix, but I don't want to take the time to find it. But if we want to have some filtering or something and say, all right, I want to just roll off all the highs, or maybe you're working with an instrument and you just want to, you want to darken it up, right? So I want to roll off the highs, we would use a high cut for that, okay? So those are really the main types of curves that you would find in a parametric EQ. A bell curve, right? Let's just look at those again. We can do a low shelf. We can do a high shelf. We can do a high cut, low pass, or a low cut, high pass. All right. Now, the Pro Q4 has a bunch of other ones in here that I won't get deep into, but we have like band passes and tilt shelves and flat tilts and all these different kinds of things, kind of preset curves that we can use. Those are there, and if you're using the Pro Q4, you can play around with those. All right. All right, so we'll stick with the bell curve for now. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can choose the degree of slope, right? So the default here is a 12 dB per octave slope. All right, and so we can see that's how it's controlling the degree of sloping here. I can start changing this. We can make this more drastic. Watch as I go up on these numbers how it changes the curve, right? It's changing the curve. It's making a much more drastic curve, right? So this is cool, right? So now I'm dealing more equally with the frequencies that I'm trying to interact or impact, right? And I can go all the way up to 96 in here. And this kind of looks like a guy with a small head shrugging his shoulders. Something. I just noticed that. Something's wrong with me. Anyway, so that's cool. So we can choose the slope, right? So if I'm dealing with, let's say I'm dealing with a high pass, right? So low cut. Same thing, right? It's doing a gradual cut. Let's say I really want to give it a sharp cut. I can come in here and I can say, you know what? Let's just get everything. I want to get a stone wall here where just everything past this frequency, I don't want to hear it. All right. So we can really get in there and we can manipulate that. This one actually even has a brick wall feature where it's like, yeah, nah, just everything past that, we don't want. Okay. So that's something that we can adjust as well. Let's go back to our bell curve. Of course, your parametric EQ is going to let us adjust the frequency, right? So this is good, right? If you have everything set and you want to just move the frequency around without accidentally changing like your gain or something, right? We can just use our frequency knob to adjust the frequency. Or if I want to dial into a specific frequency, I can type it in, right? Let's say I wanted to go right to the 2K frequency, right? I could just dial that right on in, and there we go. Right. Then, of course, we have the gain, and this is where we can boost or attenuate. Again, these knobs are good if I have my curve in place and I don't want to accidentally, because if I start doing all this stuff, right, I could accidentally change my frequency. So if I have it locked in on the frequency and I just want to boost or attenuate, got my gain knob, right, can boost, I can attenuate. Now, you notice here that it changed the scaling here. It was on 12, and so, it's kind of giving us a smaller degree of boosting. If I jump it up here to like 30, right, I have, I'm making much larger changes, right? I can go down to even to 3 dB. So if I want to do really surgical changes, most EQs, parametric EQs, will give you that scaling, right? So we can adjust that. And then I can begin to adjust the width of my curve, rather, not my slope. So in this case, right, I have a very wide slope. I probably don't want that. I probably want to deal with a specific range. So it might be called width. Oftentimes it'll be called the Q. I can come here and I can increase the Q, and you can see that sharpens or shortens the curve, right? Or the range I'm dealing with. Or I can expand the Q and really widen it out, right? So this is where we can make changes to a larger range of frequencies, or we can really get in here and surgically start to deal with specific things, right? And if we again look at some of these EQs that I've got going over here, we see here, for example, and here I'm doing more of a dynamic EQ. We'll talk about that another time. But I'm dealing with a larger frequency range here of something I wanted to deal with. I'm doing a little de-essing there is really what I'm doing. Here I'm dealing with a couple of smaller frequency ranges, right? And then up here, right, we have a variety of different cues happening there as well, okay? Let me see if I can find one where I'm really kind of getting rid of something. Somewhere in here, I'm probably killing the 2.7 hertz in one of these things somewhere. I don't know exactly where I would be doing that in this particular mix, so I don't want to go through all these to find it, but you can again get really, really surgical with that. Okay, so those are the different components of a parametric EQ, right? We have our curve type, we have our slope, we have our specific frequency, we have our gain where we can boost or attenuate, and then we have our Q where we can start to deal with the width of our curve. All right, I hope that was helpful to you. I hope that gave you a good understanding of the difference between a graphic EQ and a parametric EQ. We'll talk about dynamic EQs later on down the road. We'll get to that. But I hope that gave you a good understanding of the different controls of the parametric EQ. And we had a lot of stuff to talk about. We need to start learning kind of what those different frequency ranges are that we saw, what kind of lives in each range. We need to start seeing maybe some different things that we would do with EQ for different sources, like a vocal versus a stringed instrument versus a drum, or how do we EQ those different things? And we're going to talk about all of those things in the coming videos. All right, so I'm excited about this. This is going to be really good. Please feel free to like and subscribe to this channel and get in the comment section if you have questions, if you have specific experience with these things. things. Again, we're all here learning together, so please feel free to share. If you have specific things you want me to talk about, as you guys know, you asked me to talk about something in the comment section, there is a good chance that it will show up as a video, so please do that. And I'm going to see you guys next time around. We're going to talk about the different frequency ranges and what happens within each range.